Hello, we're nearly through winter. Beginning of next week we've got the vernal equinox, and officially that's the beginning of spring. So from now on in things just get better and better. And we've got a lot to do. I shall be planting pots full of glorious summer bulbs and also lifting and dividing perennials in the jewel garden. Carol is catching the first flushes of spring colour in a spectacular Cornish garden.
Oh! Got it! Look at that!
And Rachel goes behind the scenes and lends a helping hand in a garden that once belonged to one of our greatest children's writers. I'm lifting an acanthus spinosus here as part of our revamp of the jewel garden because we're trying to sort the plants out. You see, I've got under there, cut under the roots, but they've got really fleshy roots. And acanthus spinosus, which is a spiny version of the bear breeches, has great zigzag leaves, which are very spiky and wonderfully rich and lustrous, and then it throws up flowers with a slightly sinister purplish hood over it. But acanthus can become quite invasive. It's got these fleshy roots, which, if they break off, for instance, if I left that in the ground, it's a bit like bindweed, it will grow back. And I'm going to take all the bits of acanthus out and move them to another part of the garden. The jewel garden, it is the heart and the soul of Longmeadow. And it's called the jewel garden partly because my wife Sarah and I used to be jewellers and that sort of connects to our lives. And partly because we wanted a garden that was really rich, had lots and lots of rich, strong colours. So there's no whites, no pastels, no pinks in this part of the garden. Of course, dividing herbaceous perennials is part of the upkeep of any herbaceous border. Some plants, like acanthus, you chop with a spade. Other plants divide much easier. I've got over here, somewhere, a geranium. Now, geraniums have a different root system. If I take that out, we did have hundreds and hundreds of pots as all the plants came out. You can see that divides up very readily. I can make lots of plants from this. It's like getting a piece of string and sorting it out. There we are. We've got new bits here. Let's put them on the ground. Now straight away I've got 3, 4, 5 good plants there. And I can either replant them in a group, which will give them new energy, new vigour, and therefore much better flowering, or I can move them to other parts of the garden, or I can give them to friends. But there's no waste here at all. And it's so cheap. You buy one plant, and over the years, you end up with hundreds and hundreds, plus really vigorous flowering. I have noticed, as I've been working through the jewel garden over the last few weeks and months, that we've lost a lot. We've lost a lot to the cold. It was minus 18 here around Christmas time, and that's uncharted territory. And I guess that a lot of people around the country will find that precious plants haven't survived, even in places where you would think winter's mild, like Cornwall, for example. Carol paid a visit to Glendurgan Garden, beautiful garden down near Falmouth, to see how they have come through winter.
Glendurgan Garden is a beautiful Cornish valley garden that runs down to the Helford River. It's placed perfectly to take full advantage of the warmth the Gulf Stream brings, which means that all sorts of exotic and special plants really thrive here. But this year, even the might of the Gulf Stream couldn't fend off the effects of this past harsh winter. However, things are beginning to wake up. There are splashes of colour here and there. The rhodies are just beginning to peek through, but lots of the colour comes from these glorious camellias. This is a real beauty. It's called Winton, and its elegant branches are just sprinkled with these sort of sugar pink flowers. But perhaps this is more the sort of thing that springs to mind when you're talking about camellias. This lovely thing is called inspiration. Aren't those flowers perfection? But it's not really camellias that I'm here to see. It's something that's even more special than them. Well, I think they're really special. It's magnolias. And Assistant Head Gardener Ned Lomax is lucky enough to spend his working day with some of the most fantastic specimens. Just look at this. It is magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
It's huge. You just have no idea of the scale of it until you stand underneath it. Which magnolia is it, Ned?
This one's Campbellii alba.
Right. From the Himalayas?
That's right, yep.
How old is it?
Not as old as you might think, really. This is planted in the mid-60s. It's a decent size now. Probably won't get too much bigger.
And what you're interested in is this flower production, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
They're so lovely up there, but you know, it's a shame I can't actually see one.
Well, if I can reach, I can get you one down.
Can you? I was
Yeah,
thinking
I'll
of
give it a
climbing
go.
up the tree, but...
Okay, how's your catching, Carol? You ready?
Yeah. Oh! Got it! Look at that! It's heavy!
Yeah, it's a beautiful one, isn't it?
And of course, beetles pollinate it, don't
That's
they?
right, yeah.
Because they were around magnolias long before bees.
Yeah, millions
Wherever
of years
on the planet.
they've been around, yes.
Well, I love to see it like that, but I mean, in the distance,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
that
beautiful, isn't it?
perfect? You can really appreciate it.
We're probably about a couple of weeks behind with most
Yeah.
of the plants flowering in the garden.
All right,
So
that's
usually this will be out in full flower by now, but as you see, it's getting there. Another week or so.
yeah. Which one is it, Ned?
This is a long one. It's Magnolia sargentiana robusta alba.
Right. Sargentian, robusta, because it really is strong,
It
isn't
is robust.
But I mean, it's not the sort of plant that you can really imagine in
No,
most.
not many people have space for it, I think.
No, they wouldn't, would they? But we've got two magnolias at Glebe Cottage. We've got Stellata
Oh, yeah.
and then Leonard Messel. And the great thing about them both is they flower from being young plants.
That's right.
And also they're on a scale that most people could.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They'll fit in most gardens and you won't have to wait a lifetime for
Right.
your results. The flower bud itself will take about maybe 9 months to develop because this bud has to go all the way through the winter, and the very coldest part of the winter. This fairy cover sort of protects it, and
Yeah.
as soon as you get the sun on it, the bud will swell and the casing will drop away.
And these just peel back.
They do.
They are like little mice, aren't they? They're just lovely.
So we're a lot lower down in the valley now. You can see it's quite protected on all sides. It's got its own little microclimate.
Yeah.
Quite cool, damp conditions. And this is where we've chosen to make our New Zealand garden, because a lot of the temperate New Zealand plants really love the kind of wet conditions around here. And usually this is very leafy and green and a lot of overhead cover, but you can see, particularly this year where we've had the hard winter, some of the tree ferns are looking a little bit browned off. In fact, quite a lot of the tree ferns have just lost all their fronds completely.
Yeah.
And they look completely dead. And this is something that we get asked about quite a lot by visitors. Is my tree fern dead because it's lost its fronds? But,
And how do you tell?
well, there is a simple test. If you can get your hand up into the crown, this is the growing point where all the new fronds will come from.
Yeah.
So you can have a good feel around in there. There's little hairy tarantula legs there ready to unfurl.
But they're solid. They're like knuckles, aren't they?
Curled up for the winter,
Yeah.
but once we get some warm weather, those will unfurl, push all this leaf out of the way, and we'll get a new shoot of growth on there.
Right. So for people whose fronds have gone, I mean, what should they do if you've lost all your fronds?
Firstly, don't panic, because they are a lot hardier than people give them credit for.
But if you reach in and it's mushy,
then it's not quite so helpful.
get a new one.
Leave it, give it a chance, but start saving up for a new one.
Right.
Despite being damaged in the recent cold, ferns obviously love it in this part of Glendurgan, which is why Ned is expanding the collection. And guess who's doing the digging?
You've got all sorts of different tree ferns then in your New Zealand garden.
Yeah, that's right. We've got the Dicksonia antarctica, which is what most people will be familiar with, I think.
Yeah.
That's the hardiest one really, and perhaps the only one that you really want to try much outside the southwest.
Right.
We also have Dicksonia sclerosa, which is this kind of skinnier black one behind us. Again, that's slightly more tender, so
Black and brown at the
black
moment.
and brown, but those should be okay. They should come back because they're in a sheltered position. And then this one here is again more tender still, but really quite spectacular. This is a Cyathea dealbata, the silver tree fern.
Oh, look at that. That is just so beautiful,
Lovely,
isn't it?
This is the fern that's on the All Blacks rugby kit.
Right.
So an emblem of New Zealand.
Right, so in the right place, yeah?
Do you think so, yeah?
But it's really tender, is it?
It is. It needs the best conditions you can possibly give it, really. It likes to be cool and damp, but this one really will need protection through the winter. So if you can get it somewhere with a little bit of evergreen overhead cover, and just wrap it up, make sure you protect the crown of the fern in the winter, then you know it's worth a go. If you can get it to survive, it does look absolutely fantastic.
Well, I think that's well and truly planted. Do you know that's the very first tree fern I have ever planted?
First of many, I hope.
So I'm looking forward to coming back and seeing it up here somewhere. Wouldn't
Give it a few years.
Well, I'm pleased I did it. Thanks, Ned.
Oh, thank you.
Other fantastic gardens around the country that are thriving in their own microclimates are the Logan Botanic Gardens in Dumfries and Galloway, nestled in the warmth of the Gulf Stream. This garden is arguably the most tropical landscape in Scotland. The Portmeirion Subtropical Gardens in Gwynedd, Wales, hold over 5,000 species which thrive in this protected coastal gem. And Abbey Gardens at Tresco, Isles of Scilly, provides the perfect climate for the most tender of Mediterranean plants to flourish. And for more gardens that are in their prime right now, go to our website.
I've visited all those gardens and they are superb. Although when I went to Glendurgan, the magnolias were absolutely at their best. But I couldn't grow half the plants that they grow there. That fern wouldn't stand a chance in this garden. So it is important to grow what will be happy where you are. The acanthus will be fine here. I'm not going to enrich the soil at all because acanthus flower much better if the soil is not too well nourished. And in fact, my soil is plenty rich enough, but the trees, this lime here and the box will be taking some goodness from it. So we should get better flowers. And the idea in this part of the garden, which is called the Long Walk, is to have greenness. It should be like a cool green corridor. So we have the green of the acanthus, the green of the box, and then the flowers will arch over. Now, acanthus can be divided in two ways. The easiest way, which I should be doing mainly, because I need about 40 plants to go all the way down here and get the massed effect I want, is simply to split it with a spade. And if I put that down there, you can see that I could just chop, and you just be brave because it's a fairly fleshy thing, like that. They've got a nice growing point, we've got lots of fleshy roots, another growing point there. That will make a vigorous young plant. It's cost me absolutely nothing. The other way is with a pair of secateurs or a knife. Now you can see here I've got a bit of broken off root, and that will make a root cutting. So that's the bottom, and that's broken off from the plant. So get it the right way up, and when you're taking root cuttings, I can probably get 2 out of that. If I just cut the bottom at an angle and cut the top straight, the reason why I cut the top flat and the bottom at an angle is precisely so that I know which is the bottom and which is the top, because it can be very easy to put in your cuttings upside down. So all I have to do with these is put them vertically into a pot of compost, get 4 or 5 or 6 around the outside of a pot and put it in a warm place, water it and let that grow. That will grow into a new plant, and then each one can be potted up. It won't make a substantial flowering plant for perhaps 2, 3 or even 4 years. But that's fine. I'm gardening for the long term. So put that to one side and start planting up the bigger clumps. We've grown all sorts of things on this piece of ground, from sweet peas to pumpkins to cardoons. And so the acanthus will be a new development. And it's funny that over the years you build up memories of the garden, and that informs what you do in the future. And I can remember practically week by week what I've grown here over the last 20 years. So it should work, and it should work well. Now Rachel has been on the road again. She's gone to Buckinghamshire to help out in a garden, and it's a garden that used to belong to one of my favourite authors when I was a small child.
You enter through a funny old lich gate. There are big fruit trees shading one end of the house and a lovely silver-leafed tree at the other end.
Rachel.
You must be
hello.
Jackie. Hello. Lovely to meet you.
Welcome to Old Thatch.
Well, I must say I'm so excited to be standing in the garden that belonged to one of Britain's best-loved children's authors, Enid Blyton herself. It's
Yes,
extraordinary.
Enid Blyton lived here from 1929 to 1938, and she loved the cottage, she loved the grounds, and when we moved in about 16 years ago, the gardens were derelict.
So what was here in this space we're walking through when you moved here?
When we moved in, this was all lawn with a beautiful old yew hedge, which we still have. And Enid Blyton does write about the wrens darting in and out to the nests, feeding the young and then leaving, and they still do that these days.
This is very impressive, the lavender. Masses of it. And it looks as though when you've cut it back, which you've obviously done hard, but not going into the old wood here, then you've just left all the seed heads so that it self-seeds into the gravel.
That's right, yes.
You've got babies just everywhere, so
Yes.
it's working a treat.
Yes.
What does it look like then in the summer?
Well, as you know, plants don't necessarily come true from seed, so we have a beautiful array of colours from the palest blue through the traditional lavender and even into the darkest blue at the other end.
Just beautiful. Of course, when you think of Enid Blyton, you think of her very famous books, and so Famous Five, of course, Noddy.
Yes.
But what else did she write much about this garden?
Oh, Enid Blyton wrote constantly. She published a series of books called the Old Thatch series. So lots and lots of writing about the garden.
Well, these are really a good size, these beds, aren't they? All herbaceous and mixed. I must say, Jackie, I love the way that you've left all this top growth on over the winter, because had you cut this back in the autumn, of course, there'd be nothing to look at. Look at that lovely phlomis there, the shape.
Yes,
Beautiful, isn't it? And I
Yes.
like this, the Iris sibirica as well. And I can see you've started cutting back a bit, so you've got the grasses has gone there. What do you think about the echinopsis? Do you think that's still earning its keep now? Looks a
No, I
bit
think
sad.
the echinopsis has probably suffered a bit from the wind, so I think it needs a bit of TLC.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that, because there's lovely new growth coming from the base there. So what do you think? Should we chop this off?
Yes. I'll go and get the barrow.
What do you think? Should we get in and try and go for that
Yes, good idea.
one? This is very cathartic, don't you think?
It's perfect, both outside and in, just like a fairy tale house. Roses bloom everywhere. There are dozens all hanging gracefully down.
Well, this is a really lovely length, this rose arbour. You can get lots of plants on it.
Yes.
And most of these ramblers, aren't they?
Yes, yes they are. We have Albertine, which is a beautiful, beautiful soft baby pink and really full flower. We also have American Pillar. It's a single flower and it's red with a pale base to the petal, and that just spreads and spreads and flowers for a long period of time. We have a stem
You've
here
got an unhappy...
that doesn't look happy at all. What do you think, Rachel?
Oh no, I see. Well, I see what you mean. For a lower stem, it's a bit feeble, isn't it?
It is.
You know what we could do? On the other side, you've got this lovely, nice young stem here, and that's pretty vigorous.
Yes.
In fact, you've got two, so we could take both of those down and tie them along this way to
Yes.
replace this, take this one off.
Okay,
Yes?
let's do it.
Happy to do that. And the lower we can take it down, the better, because we'll encourage all the energy that normally goes into growing straight up, into breaking the buds all the way along here, so we'll get lovely flowers from each of these. Do you think we should tie another one along here? That would really hold it down.
That's a good idea.
And
Very good.
I think that'll be good. Well, that was an excellent day.
It certainly was.
Mind you, I have to say, if I had a bit more time, I would just quickly clip your viburnum tinus, these lollipops. But I can see a problem on these leaves, the holes there. I'd say that's viburnum beetle.
Yes.
And that's interesting because that's, at the moment, #1 on the top of the RHS list of pests that people are asking questions about. It sort of knocked slugs and snails right off the top, the #1 spot. So that's, I mean, it doesn't look very nice now, but once the larvae hatch, which is in sort of April, May, then that almost turns to lace. So if it were me, I'd probably spray it with an organic spray.
Right.
But also it will help when you do the trimming because you'll cut off a lot of that as well.
Yes,
and then
good.
just clear it all away. So on a brighter note, I have got something, a little going home present.
Oh, how lovely.
Enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful day.
And if you want to visit Enid Blyton's garden yourself, it is open to the public from the 14th of May. But before you go, check our website for times and details of opening. I loved those broad box hedges. They look fantastic. But of course what we're all doing, whether it's in a herbaceous border or here in the potting shed, is preparing for a really good show in the summer. I'm making up a mix for planting lilies into pots. Now this compost mix is a bark-based compost and I've added lots of leaf mould to it. They prefer an ericaceous soil or compost. Leaf mould will be fine, neutral is okay. And if you don't use peat, which I don't, then leaf mould is a really good substitute. And if you haven't got any leaf mould, add some vermiculite to a bark-based compost. Right, that's perfect. And the lily I'm going to put in pots is this. Isn't that magnificent? This is Lilium regale, which has huge, great white trumpets with a sort of bruised interior. And now that's quite expensive. That's about £5. So we want to look after it and make sure that we grow it as well as possible. But it will last a long time, so it's a good investment. So I put crocks in the bottom of these pots and just put some compost in the bottom. And I can't overemphasize the importance of having light, loose compost. Lilies are woodland plants and they like a cool root run. So place these carefully in, not damaging them. And you can see quite deep in the pot, and no more than 3 in a pot that size, I don't think. And these will grow through and they'll flower, I suppose, at their best in July. One of my favourite summer flowering bulbs are foxtail lilies, or Eramuris. They don't look like bulbs at all, but like mad spiders or octopus. They come from high grassland in the mountainous areas of South Africa. And what they love is really good drainage and lots of summer sunshine. So I'm adding plenty of horticultural grit to my compost mix. Doesn't matter what compost you use, as long as it's really well drained. I've got plenty of crocks in the bottom of a big pot, a layer of compost, and then carefully spread these roots out. Cover it with more grit, and then put it somewhere where it can quietly grow, and then I will place it in bright sunshine to get the maximum effect of the flowers. Finally, I've got another South African bulb. This is Eucomis, which has got a spectacular green pineapple-like flower. And it's a bit tender, not quite as tender as we used to think, but it won't take a really cold, wet spring spell. So I'm going to bring it on in a pot and then plant it out probably in June into the dual garden. I'm using a potting mix with plenty of vermiculite in it, but if you're going to grow them in pots permanently, use the same mix as you have for Eramuris. Now this is the perfect time to be planting up summer bulbs, but here are some other ideas for jobs you can get on with right now. It may not officially be spring yet, but the weeds have already started to grow vigorously. And now is the time to get on top of them before they get on top of you, especially before they start to swamp your precious seedlings. If, like me, you have wet ground, it can take a long time for it to dry out enough to be ready for sowing. But if you put some cloches down, you'll find it'll be ready for action much sooner. And if you haven't got any cloches, a piece of clear plastic is a good substitute. If you've got a cold greenhouse, it won't be ready for planting your tomatoes in for another couple of months. You can use that time by broadcasting in the beds a salad mix. That will give you a harvest which can then be cleared to make room for the tomatoes. A job that I must finish this weekend is the pruning of my soft fruit. Now this area has been through various changes, but it's always been edible. I had vegetables in here for a while and I moved the soft fruit into it, so those plants are already quite old. I did start the other day pruning back these red currants, and you can see the sort of shape I'm looking for. This is a good example because it's on a leg, and that gets ventilation around it, and it means that it helps control sawfly, because they don't like wind. And so it's open, got nothing growing inwards. I've tipped it back, a nice strong structure, and we'll get good new growth. And I can make these look like that. So to start with, just prune away the middle. Because the big problem of red currants, white currants and gooseberries is sawfly and mould. And both of them are best dealt with by good ventilation. Now, you look at this. That is dead. So we need to take that off. Get right in there. Now, what we have is an open dish shape with these ribs, these strong structural branches splaying out. And when you're happy that it is nice and open and it's evenly spaced ribs around it, and you removed anything that's crossing or dead or rubbing, then you can start to reduce it. Now, because this is a very old plant, I'm going to cut this back very hard because that will rejuvenate it. If it was a young one and very healthy, I probably would just cut it back by about a third, and gradually it will get bigger and bigger. But this is going to have the chop. So we'll take this back like that, like that. And you can see I'm leaving a little bit of new wood everywhere, but as long as you cut to something, i.e. a bud, it doesn't matter terribly, because this fruit's on older wood. So we probably won't have a lot of fruit this year, but we'll have some, and we've got enough bushes to see us through. There we are. It's not a thing of beauty, but it'll work. It's rejuvenated, it's open, nice strong framework, and the new growth will grow amazingly vigorously off that because it's got a good root system. So I've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 more to do. Lots to keep me occupied this weekend, along with everything else. I hope you have a really good weekend in your own garden, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday. Bye-bye.